FCCI and FIDE welcome you to this podcast where we spotlight extraordinary minds. We'd like to showcase people of Indian origin and expats who have contributed immensely to the countries that they have made their home and across the world in different fields. So in today's episode, we delve into the remarkable journey of Professor Vinod Subramaniam. So he's a visionary leader in science, academia, and policymaking alike. And he is currently the president of the executive board of the University of Twente, marking another illustrious chapter in his career. Previously, he was the Rector Magnificus at the Vrije University of Amsterdam for 6 transformative years. Before his administrative roles, his academic prowess shone bright as a professor of nanobiophysics at the University of Twente, where his research explored the intricacies of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, which are very relevant today. Join us as we unravel the story behind Vinod's multifaceted contributions to science and education, and also to understand his view of the world today. So without much delay, let's welcome Professor Vinod Subramaniam to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Amey. I'm very pleased to be here on this podcast or videocast as it is, and to be in conversation with you.
Thank you for your time. So probably to begin with, I said a few things about you, but would you how would you like to describe yourself to the youth, or would you like to put it in different words or something?
I'm a curious mind who's been all around the place, I think, in a sense. Look, I grew up, of course, in India, and then I studied in the US. And then after about 10 years, decided I had to see another part of the world, and decided I'd go do a postdoc in Germany. And I thought it was going to be for 2 years before doing the traditional thing, going back to the US. And I ended up staying in Europe for the next 20 years. So, and in a sense, this, I think my career has been a series of fortunate accidents, but I've been very fortunate in sort of rolling into new roles, and here I am now.
I'm glad you said fortunate accidents. That's something to pick up. It's very nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to plan these things, and I don't. So you just roll with the punches and go where life takes you.
Right. Yeah. Very nice again. So, can you describe a little bit more about your journey so far, as in maybe a little bit about your youth, and then maybe what inspired you to get to the Netherlands or something?
Yeah, no, like I said, fortunate accidents. As I said, I grew up in New Delhi, and I'd actually started college at the IIT Delhi, but I already knew that I'd been admitted to an American university, Cornell, but I was waiting for, what it is for, we have to wait for visas and things like that, so I was waiting for, for the visa to come through, and at that time, there was 1985, I mean, I had also gotten a scholarship, and it was actually exceptionally rare that you got a scholarship for an undergraduate degree. And so when that all happened, I pushed off in 85, and there I was, I was 18 years old, and in one suitcase, and you end up in the middle of nowhere, New York State. But it was a fantastic time. I was there 4 years. I then went and did graduate school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Got a couple of masters and a PhD there, and then at that point, went off to Germany to do a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute. It was also an opportunity that was really fascinating. Thought I'd go for 2 years and go back to the US, and ended up actually staying there for 6 years. And how I came to the Netherlands was actually interesting. During my postdoctoral period, I actually worked together with groups at the University of Twente. But when I left Germany, I actually left to go to the UK, and I had actually I'd gone into industry, I'd gone into a pharmaceutical industry, because my wife, she was at that time in the US, didn't want to come to Germany. I didn't want to go back to the US, and we compromised on the UK because she could move there with her job. And after a couple of years, I got recruited to this role here at the University of Twente. In fact, right as I moved to the UK, they had contacted me, but I said, look, I just started a new job. I'm not interested. But they were persistent. And a couple of years later, I'd realized that I wanted to go back to academics, and that's how it happened. And in fact, so about exactly 20 years later now, so it's 2004 February when I came here, and pretty close to exactly 20 years later, here I am. And again, within the Netherlands, I made a journey. When I started here as professor, I became director of one of the institutes. Then I was director of the Farm Institute Armhof in Amsterdam, but then rolled into the Rector Magnificus role in 2015, and in 21 I came back here as president.
Beautiful.
It's kind of it's been an interesting journey, also within the Netherlands. Yeah.
Very nice to hear.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned quite a few things, and
Yeah.
it's inspiring, definitely. But how do you look at your achievements so far?
I mean, I think in most of the time you try to do the best you can.
Yeah.
And that is in academics, in science, in education. What I realized at some point, of course, was, especially at the role, when the role of Rector Magnificus actually came along, was I realized that in the history of this country, there were not been that many non-Western administrators at that level. So the opportunity to become Rector Magnificus of a Dutch university was carried quite a lot of weight. It meant breaking a certain sort of glass ceiling, and I wasn't quite aware of it at that time. It sort of was there in the back of my head, but not active. I only realized it when I left the university, actually. Because there and that happened when I was actually saying goodbye to my university student council, and one of the members actually burst out in tears, saying, "You don't know how important you've been as a role model for those of us who come from other backgrounds, and you gave us inspiration and hope that we can also achieve those sorts of things." And that's when it actually hit home, saying that there was more. There was more to it than just the scientific achievements or the academic achievements. There was also this notion of being a role model, which I hadn't been very actively thinking about, but it was obviously there, and that's very powerful.
Since you brought up you mentioned how not many non-Westerners were in such administrative roles, I would say. Do you see some benefits of being an expat, in your field of work? It could be maybe advantages, anything. It's an open question in a sense.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, of course, you bring an outside-in perspective. Yeah, I mean, you have obviously cultural differences where you can ask questions, saying, okay, why do we do things in a certain way?
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's from our background as being from India or from a perspective of having lived and worked in different countries, I think it helps you be robustly critical, or in any case, to ask questions about and why, why are we doing it like this, and what's the advantage? It's also it's a very nice learning experience, I mean, there are also positive things about the way things are done here, and then you learn why, and it's also learning to become a part of the culture of the local context that you're sitting in.
Right. Yeah. That's very well. So with such vast experience and also being in different probably circles of probably policymakers, with academicians, with scientists, young scientists or something, how do you, in a sense, see the future of the Netherlands itself? So yeah, it could be with any of these caps basically. So yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's an interesting time right now, also politically in the Netherlands, and so we have to see how things sort of develop. I think we're at the cusp of change in many ways. I think the country has been quite welcoming of international talent. Whether that stays this way is very much a question. I think there are concerns about that. But on the other hand, I think we have to address, the questions the society is asking and confronting us with, and so we have a role to play there. I think there are challenges ahead of us, but we have to also make sure that we address them squarely. I think, look, the Netherlands is a fantastic place. I mean, I've made it my home the last 20 years now, so I'm very much a part of the furniture, if you will. But I think it's also important that and my integration has been helped by the fact that I speak the language now. I learned the language very early when I came, and I think that really helps. I don't think I would have been able to make it to these roles without having a reasonable fluency in the language. I think that's important. But I think we have interesting times coming ahead. How it's all going to pan out, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
But we'll see. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Nice to hear. But with probably the cultural differences, or were there some stereotypes that you had to encounter? Or
look, there are always stereotypes. I mean, the thing is that I've been stopped by police because I don't look like who should be walking around in certain streets of Amsterdam. So I mean, those sorts of things. Of course, you gotta run into that.
Right.
But stuff happens, and that's. But you deal with it, and then you move on, and you try to address things. I think again. Have I been negatively influenced by it? No, not necessarily. I think like I said, I think speaking the language really helps. That has helped me. But yeah, you have to work to sort of to get into to position yourself. On the other hand, I've managed to do it. And you get lucky breaks.
Nice. So in the same, let's say the same context or something, would you have some advice or suggestions to probably the younger people who are entering the country, or it could also be in the perspective of Europe, something entering to adapt or to avoid?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's two things. One is you don't have to fundamentally change yourself. I mean, be true unto yourself. It's very important. I mean, you bring something to the table from your own culture, from your own perspectives. You do bring that outside your perspective. That's great. On the other hand, I found it very important when I was also in Germany and here to learn the language, because that really helped me to become part of society, to engage in conversations, to engage in dialogues and debates, and that really made a difference. So if there's any one advice I would give is, try to learn the language. You don't have to be fluent in it, but just the fact that you're able to have the conversation makes a huge difference in sort of making the connections. And it's not about integrating or anything, it's about making connections, and it's about sort of saying, okay, I'm making a meaningful connection with the context that you're living and working in.
Very clear. Thank you. Professor Vinod. How do you maintain your connection with India, or the culture and probably what you miss about home?
I miss a lot about home. Yeah? You miss the colors, you miss the smells, you miss the busyness, the crowds. But look, my mother lives in Chennai, my in-laws live in Chennai, so we're back, at least a couple of times a year. So we retain a strong connection with the country, obviously because of family. I cook myself, and then I try to cook Indian food to sort of to keep me connected with that part of my heritage, music, movies, all of that. I subscribe to Indian newspapers, so I try to stay connected in many ways.
Nice, very nice to hear. So again, taking the baton from this to maybe the diaspora that moves in the same thing. I think at some point we see that every immigrant, let's say, who comes into the EU or to the Netherlands, we come with a chip on our shoulders saying, we probably have to do that extra little bit or stay up an hour later. It's not just time, with effort or with how do you juggle maybe a little bit with the work life, if I can put it that way, or what could be added to this equation somehow?
Yeah, look, I understand, I think, the question. In a sense, I think you feel like you have to prove yourself, and you have to do a bit more. I don't know, I haven't actively felt that, but I think I've just sort of worked at it and done my thing, and I've obviously made it fairly far with that, with whatever I did. I don't know if I know what the formula was. I just be engaged, try to understand what the context is and what people are saying, and what's maybe between the lines. Try to read between the lines, because not everything is always said explicitly. So trying to understand that. I'm not sure that I do that all the time, but I think it's a sensibility that you learn as you go along. I think that's important. Do I really? The work-life balance you were asking about. Look, I think I'm pretty much a workaholic, so I don't know if there's that much balance. You'd have to ask my wife and child about that. But I try to relax here and there.
Yeah. Nice to hear. So in a sense, you're saying also taking the best of what's offered to you at that point. Or?
Yeah, I think what it is really trying to make the most of all of the opportunities that are presented to you, or that present themselves, or you seize. You can also seize the opportunities, or you can also create the opportunities, and you can go out and seek them. And I think that's certainly something that I can recommend. If you see something, you say, I want to try to do that, follow that dream. Yeah.
Brilliant. Nice to hear. At this point, I don't mean to poke you more over exactly what we spoke, but just a bit more about. So, we, like you said, about it's not just about integrating, it's about doing the things that actually probably would learn the language or something like that. So what would you say are like the boundaries on things? At some point we also should be keeping our identity and also be part of the place.
You don't have to give up your identity to become part of the society. I think it's perfectly okay to keep both facets. We grow as people. We grow as people in the context of the environment that we're in. I have now lived longer in the Netherlands than I lived in India. Yeah?
Yes.
So, I spent the first 18 years in India, and then I've now been here 20 years almost. And so, that's the longest I've lived anywhere. Yeah. Does that make me Dutch? No. Does that make me any less Indian? Also no.
Not.
So I mean, in a sense, I think I'm the product of all my experiences, which is 18 years of India, 10, 11 years in the US, 6 years in Germany, 2 years in the UK, almost 20 years here. So it's an integration of all of these things. I don't feel any less Indian for that. Yeah.
Right.
So I think in a sense, I don't think I've really given up that part of the identity. Yeah. I'm different, of course.
Yeah.
Because I'm now 56, soon to be 57. But again, I carry with me the baggage of all of these experiences.
Very nice. So the same thing also with like a perspective of some expats have the difficulty when they immediately move to a completely different, let's say, culture or something, to do this without disturbing peace in the other country or something. It's about, I mean, not everybody does this very smoothly. They at some point,
Look, making these kinds of moves are difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, you're taking yourself out of a certain well-known context and transplanting yourself into something completely different. And how you adapt to that, the mileage varies. It's an individual thing. That is also the question of of the people you have around you who help you. I have, for me, I mean, look, I was very young when I left, so I mean, I was in university environments in the US, and so I was able to adapt fairly quickly. I think in both in the US and in other places, I said, I think I made a choice not to dissociate myself from India, but not to make a little India for myself, in the sense that I said, I actively sought out also the connections with the local, and that the part of that is also, for example, in Germany, was very clearly in terms of going out and learning the language, because that made me, I could also, within the context of a Max Planck Institute, stayed with the internationals, and made a little bubble for myself. But I tried actively to get out of the bubble through certain things like learning language or being involved in activities and so on. That was the way I did it. Yeah. And like I said, that may be different for you or for other people. I think you have to find your own way through the through this it's not a dilemma, but through this experience. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. So having this done, probably this spoken about this, how would you also told us a little bit about what you think is the future of the Netherlands and all of this. But in that context, connecting these two, how would you say the expats or Indians or expats, how should they be contributing to the, let's say, the society and economy, let's say, socio-economic development of the Netherlands?
But I think they're already doing that.
Right.
Yeah? I mean, in the sense that I think a lot of the expats or Indians, or at least our diaspora that's here, is actually highly educated. So they're here in sort of the knowledge industries. So you see that they are contributing to, I mean, folks who come here for higher education then stay in the system. So I think they are absolute value add to to this country. And I say, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I think the talent, certainly in the technical fields that this country is looking for, increasingly needs to be imported. And I think in that sense, the diaspora is absolutely adding. But there's also another diaspora. Well, it's not so much a diaspora. There's also another community of of Indian origins, and that's the Dutch who come from Suriname. And that's also what you see is that, I mean, the population of this country, the Suriname origin diaspora, and the Indian origin diaspora that came they were highly separated. But actually what you now see is that the generations are mixing together, because the next generation is in school together, they're intermarrying and things like that. So you're seeing that also coming back together, and that's also fascinating to watch.
Absolutely. Yes. Very, very nice. So since we touched upon a little bit on science now in your answer, open question again. How would you look at the future of science probably in 21st century? So there's a lot of relatively new things that are becoming widespread, let it be AI, advent of space, and a few things like that. So, would you,
Look, again, here, my crystal ball is about as clear as yours. But I think there's obviously a few trends. I mean, we have huge challenges facing us. We have an energy transition, we have a climate transition going on, we've got agricultural transitions, we've got all kinds of biodiversity collapses and so on. I think that we as a species absolutely have to sort of make sure that we're working on these major challenges and trying to find solutions to make to keep this planet livable and habitable. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of technological advantages, things going on. I also, although I'm at an engineering university, I think it's an illusion to think that technology alone will solve our problems, because I think technology will contribute to the solutions, but technology is useless if people don't accept it. So from that sense, you also need to have the social sciences and humanities to really sort of say, how do you make sure that technology lands in society? So I think that's why this university is also quite special, because we have that interface between technology and the social sciences, and trying to say, okay, how does that come through? So I think those are the sorts of things that we as science also really need to be looking at. But that also means interdisciplinary working, not so much in topics, but in I think generally across the board. I think what you're seeing is that the problems are at the interfaces of disciplines. And so what it requires is a different sort of way of working, and working together in larger teams with different expertises, to look at an integrated solution to the problem that you are addressing. I think that's the challenge of our times. Is trying to say, okay, how do we chip away at a deeply complex problem, a wicked problem, with many different approaches, and that we bring our individual expertises from our individual disciplines to this, because there's no one discipline that's going to solve the problem. That's a conviction that I have, and which direction, whether it's AI or something else, I think you're going to need this approach in all issues.
Very nice to hear. Since we spoke about different fields now, for a common man listener, can you explain the process of scientific discovery? So that, in a sense, that it would demystify it for people who might not be especially familiar, especially maybe the youth or people who are not directly in touch.
Yeah, look, for me, it starts with a question, and you say, okay, whether we see it, you're curious about something. Why is the sky blue? How do we build something? You start with a question or a challenge. And I'm an experimentalist, so for me it's a question. Okay, you try to do an experiment to try to answer the question, and most often it fails, So then you figure out, okay, what do I need to do to fix it, to make it work? And so it's an iterative process, so you learn. So science is also something where, there's not a correct answer always at the first time, so you have to do multiple different approaches. Now that means looking at it from different perspectives, different angles, talking to different people, getting the different perspectives on board, until you iterate towards what seems to be a solution to the original question that you were asking. And on the way there, you will probably come across a half a dozen other questions and other parts that you will divert onto, which is actually also pretty cool and interesting. And in fact, very often what happens is that you start with a question and you end up answering something very different because that's where the path led you. So that's how the science works, and I think we're very fortunate to be in a system that gives us the ability to sort of play around a little bit. But we're also fortunate to live in a system where we can also look at more practical sort of approaches to. If we're at a technological university, so we're in engineering solutions, then you can say, okay, you get inspired by a question, let's say from a company or society that says, look, we're sort of struggling with this, can you think about this? And then you come up with a solution to build, to fix, you make membranes, so, and you work for the EMI and they say, okay, there's a particular question and you say, okay, how do I develop something that addresses that question? And I think that interaction, where you're actually inspired by a question that comes out of the practice of a company or society, is actually really fascinating. Equally important is, of course, the other part where, this is the classic picture of the scientist sort of, sitting and thinking in her room and saying, I have a fantastic idea and this is what she comes up with. That's the blue sky approach. That's also okay. This is all part of doing science.
Beautiful. Thank you. Within this, science perspective, how relevant is it yet to still get a PhD and Master of Science maybe? I'm asking this in probably different lights. First would be the number of people, at least in the developing countries, or the sheer number of people who are getting master's degrees, or probably tens of thousands of people every year. And now the number of people getting their PhDs is also increasing. This is one light in terms of numbers, and then I'm also looking at how much should we diversify this into probably entrepreneurship at a younger age, probably getting a single degree or something of that sort.
Look, it's very hard to give a generic answer to that. I think it depends on the context. If you look at the number of people in the Netherlands getting PhDs, if you compare it to other countries in Europe, for example, the number is quite low.
Okay.
You could interestingly, you could. If you just look at the OECD, it's not that we are on average or saying it's lower compared to other countries. Now, it's not a numbers game. So you can make it a numbers game, but I'm not sure that makes sense. I think what we have to see is, okay, what do I need for the ambition that I have as a country or as a field, and if your ambition is to be a knowledge economy, then maybe you need to have more highly educated people. And again, I think, like I said, the local context is extremely important. So I'm not sure I would venture into saying that you look at the numbers. Numbers are one part of the picture. I think it's very much more important to take a look at saying, what is the value of education? In terms of, does education emancipate people out of poverty, out of a situation that they are in? It has very often had that role. And so then if you look at the role of education in terms of bettering the lives of people, then it's a no-brainer. You need to actually make sure that more people get educated. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be in higher degrees or multiple degrees or whatever. It is also a question of what is important. I mean, if I look in terms of, we are at a university, but in the Dutch system, you also have, for example, the universities of applied science, and you also have these more vocational trainings, such as the ROCs. I mean, if I look at, for example, our solar team, which won, was second in the solar race in Australia, that car could not have been built without the golden hands of the students who come from the ROC. Yeah, so we might think about, from the university students who actually sort of, come up with the theoretical perspective or something, but you need people to sort of put it together, the engineers, and so that team was a team of students from the university, the team of students from the Hogeschool, the University of Applied Science, and students from the ROC. You wouldn't have a successful car without all three of them. So from that perspective, I think it's also important to see what does education do and what level, and people choose different paths, and that's okay. You need all three paths, all of the paths that are possible. But education does have an emancipatory role. And I think in that sense, it is absolutely worth investing in education. Now, the other point about entrepreneurship, that's also great. It's fine. You can do entrepreneurship early on. That's why we are called the Entrepreneurial University. We're known as the Entrepreneurial University because it's not so much about going off and setting up a company or something like that, but it's more about saying, okay, do you have an entrepreneurial spirit? Yeah, and does that mean, and what that means is, are you willing to take a risk? You can take a risk academically also. It's not just a question of taking a risk in a commercial sense. You can also take a risk in terms of following an idea that is not the safe route to follow. But that means being prepared to fail and to sort of pick yourself up and try again. So I think that's what you try to inculcate in students, the youth.
Beautiful. Very insightful. How would you describe the changes you witnessed in the scientific community in the Netherlands compared to when you started? Or this could also be like a European perspective.
Yeah, look, I mean, let's compare it to the Netherlands, the University of Twente. I mean, because I can compare that. I started here in 2004, and if I look at it now in 2024, it's become significantly more international. The community has become significantly more international. There were plenty of international sort of students or PhD candidates in any case, also at the time when I was here. But now I see also a lot more faculty. Look, when I was here, I was one of maybe 2-3 people of Indian origin who were on the faculty. There were a number of Dutch, German professors, but that's changed completely. There's a lot more international faculty here, but also at other Dutch universities, and that has to do with the fact that all Dutch universities are very good and they're very attractive for faculty. I see, I think there's a lot more work in terms of team science, but focus areas change, but those are sort of institutional choices and strategic choices that you make. But in principle, what I see is a very robust academic system that's of exceedingly high quality. But it is under pressure, and of course, these are things which are built on the investments of decades, and so we're still living actually on the investments that were made 20-30 years ago, and we have to see how this all develops.
Yes. Would there be a kind of reason why the youth should still pursue science today, or how would you?
it's fantastic because there's all kinds of fantastic things to discover and make and and problems to solve. So I'd say there's so many cool things to learn and do. So absolutely go for it. Yeah. Science and technology, it's great. And look, but if your choices are to learn languages, beautiful. That's also okay.
Nice.
But I think dig deep into something that you're passionate about,
right,
and follow it.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Also, like a follow-up would be because there's a lot of let's say IT and computer sciences and AI are more funded, better paid, and also more cited, maybe in a sense, if I can put it that way. What would you say is still like? Why would core sciences still be important, and how would we inspire the youth to still pick up the core
look, I mean, if you're doing this because it's better funded and you get paid more, well, okay, that's not the driver for most people. I mean, that is. I mean, I think the joy of discovery is also something that I think still plays a role, and I mean, I'm not. Look, I think you will always see people sort of saying, you're going to be fascinated by the stars. I don't want to be an astronomer. I'm not worried about that in terms of the fact that I think that people are going to go into IT or AI or whatever, and if they want to, that's fine. That's a choice, that you can make. Yeah? But I think it's our responsibility as scientists also to show, and certainly, the youth of today, and starting with the kids, is about the fascination of discovery or the fascination of science, about technology, but also all the other fields. I mean, we are human because of the humanities. So it's not just a science and technology thing. Yeah? It's also the social sciences and the humanities. So it's the pursuit of knowledge, and whatever that knowledge is. Yeah, I think that's what our jobs are. Is to say, hey, this is cool, and it's not just only theoretical stuff. It's also stuff like you're gonna build it. Look, I mean, you can't build a house without a bricklayer and a plumber, and if you only had architects, you're not going to get anything built.
Nice, very nice to hear. So, do you still collaborate with fellow scientists in India, or do you have some?
I have a lot of contacts with fellow scientists in India. I don't run an active lab anymore because I'm an experimentalist, and that's not possible to do. But I have plenty of contacts with the scientific field, and I do have interactions, but it's not as intensive as it used to be when I was active.
Right. Yeah. There's also word about many campuses, like international campuses, moving abroad and then setting up some things.
Yeah, well, look, I think that you can do that, but I don't think it makes any sense for us.
Right.
I don't think we should do that, quite frankly. I mean,
yeah.
We're a Dutch university, we're a small university. I mean, we've got plenty on our hands, just sort of, keeping this thing going. Than having sort of dreams of empire.
Right. Clear.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Finally, what are your thoughts on in a sense, a growing limelight on India, or how do you hope the Dutch and Indian relationship would bloom at a societal level or a scientific level?
Look, I think it's obviously very clear that India is really is on the cusp of making really big things happen. I mean, there's lots of big things already happening in the country. I mean, it's the 5th largest economy. It's going to be, I mean, there's a lot. It's the largest population. I mean, you can't ignore India. I think you ignore India at your own peril. I think you should absolutely be interacting with them, with India, with Indian society, with Indian scientists, with business, for many different reasons. Not only because of the markets, and it's not a financial thing, but also because it is a large, vibrant, rich democracy. It shares many values that the Netherlands has, and because it's where I was born. I mean, I that's of course plays a role. So I mean, you can't avoid India.
Yeah.
Just as you can't avoid China, I mean, this is very much one of the major forces in the world.
Yeah. So to wrap up, maybe, is there anything that you wish I would have asked or I've missed that you want to say as some message that you want to convey? Or
I mean, the thing is, I'm sure there are things that we will always say, oh yeah, I wish why didn't you ask me about this, or why didn't you ask him about that? But then there will always be another opportunity for another conversation.
Lovely.
Yeah. Then I'd say then do it at another time. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Professor
Thank you
Vinod.
for the opportunity.
Thank you.